In a perfect world, scientists could do their research based on topics that interest them. And if they find something cool, then they would be rewarded, celebrated, recognized for their discovery. Maybe they'd even get a pay raise because in this perfect world, all scientists make enough money to live a good life. But you know what? Who doesn't like a little extra? And in this perfect world, it shouldn't really matter whether the general public fully understands the discovery or has any kind of personal connection to the discovery or even to future applications. We do not live in that world. We live in a world where we need headlines like King Tut's killer tomb fungus redeems itself as a powerful cancer fighter to describe research that found that a compound extracted from a fungus stopped leukemia cells from replicating. I gotta say, I can't blame anyone here, really, even though I rolled my eyes. Whichever public relations intern got handed a class of benzofuranoinidylene bearing heptacyclic fungal rips with anti-cancer activities, published last week in Nature, was truly facing an uphill battle. And good on them for coming up with a hook so good that it showed up in several mainstream news outlets, including Forbes, who announced the prototype King Tut's curse might kill leukemia. I'm not going to downplay the research itself, even though the compound failed to have any effect on any other cancers, and even though it was only demonstrated in petri dishes, and even though it performed about as well as current treatments, it's always cool when scientists find a new potential medicine. Maybe this will end up being cheaper or have some way to make it a more powerful treatment. The research is good, and it's good that their next step will focus on trying it on animal models, because honestly, fuck leukemia. But would Forbes have covered this story were it not for the King Tut angle? I'm thinking probably not. I mean, I know I wouldn't be covering it right now, so well done to the PR hacks. You got me. So, what's the connection with King Tut? What does a 3,000-year-old dead pharaoh have to do with Aspergillus flavus, the fungus that provided the compound that the researchers extracted? Short answer, nothing. It has nothing to do with King Tut. Long answer, get in losers. We're going down another classic Rebeccawatson rabbit hole. Trademark. As a kid, of course, I did learn about the mummy's curse through TV shows and jokes and movies and comic books. I learned King Tut was apparently a pharaoh who was mummified and placed in a tomb full of riches, with a curse placed on the door warning all potential thieves to stay away lest they die a horrible death. When archaeologists in the 1920s opened the tomb up, they all died horrible deaths. Cartoons, comics, jokes, movies, and TV shows wouldn't lie to me, would they? Yeah, it turns out that that's not actually true. King Tut's tomb had no such warning carved on the door, nor was there any other evidence of any curse being placed upon it at all. Ancient Egyptians didn't really seem to do a lot of cursing, but you know who did? Early to mid 19th century European writers who couldn't get enough of mummies after Napoleon's invasion of Egypt. Fun fact, the first known English language story about a reanimated mummy was written by Jane Loudon in 1827. And in her story, the mummy came back to life in the year 2126, where there are automatons and balloon travel and women wearing trouser pants, just like today. Anyway, a lot of writers back then took a real interest in mummy curses, including Louisa May Alcott. Not a lot of people remember that Beth died because she swiped a scarab necklace from an ancient tomb discovered beneath Plumfield. Okay, just kidding, but she really did write a book called Lost in a Pyramid or The Mummy's Curse, which you can read in full online if you're interested. So by the time a group of archaeologists opened up the relatively untouched tomb of King Tut in the 1920s, mummies and their curses were already a known threat amongst Western literary circles. It was inevitable that people would apply the idea of a curse to this tomb, especially since it was so rare to find a tomb in such pristine condition, as it had generally been left alone and safe from grave robbers throughout its history. until Howard Carter and his team of grave robbers came along. Their excavation was financed by Lord Carnarvon, who was one of about 25 Westerners present when the tomb was first breached. Carnarvon died 5 months later, and the gossip took off, with people like Arthur Conan Doyle throwing fuel on the fire, speculating about spirits protecting the tomb on behalf of King Tut. So how did Carnarvon die? Was he found with a cobra around his neck or his mouth full of beetles? No, Carnarvon had already been an invalid thanks to a car accident that happened 20 years prior, leaving him to suffer frequent infections. At his death, authorities determined he had died from sepsis following a mosquito bite that he had raked open while shaving, plus he also had pneumonia. And the other 24 grave robbers who violated this supposed curse, well, they all died. I mean, eventually, it was 100 years ago. But did they die soon after they plundered the tomb? No. A comparison between them and another 20 Westerners who were in Egypt at the time, but not present at the tomb, found no difference between their lifespans, though it did find that women who raided the tomb tended to live much, much longer. Make of that what you will. If you, unlike me, have an attention span greater than 45 seconds, you may be wondering, what does any of this have to do with a fungus? I actually had to pause here in my research to remind myself why I was reading all of these mummy stories. Okay, so there wasn't any curse for the people who opened King Tut's tomb, but the myth of a curse continued to spread. In May of 1973, a dozen conservationists in Poland decided to open up the tomb of a king who had been buried there in the late 15th century. By September, they had finished restoring the tomb and reinterred the corpse with no issue. But in April of 1974, nearly a year after opening the tomb, one of the men died. Then another died in June, and another in August, and then another in April of the following year. What was the cause of death? I do not know. All I know is that in total, 15 members of the 12-person crew died prematurely. Look, when you're dealing with supernatural curses, things naturally get mixed up. When it's only been documented in a language you don't speak, it becomes really hard to work out fact from fiction. Anyway, at some point thereafter, a microbiologist named Boleslaw Smyk had a non-supernatural hypothesis. He suspected that maybe those people died by chance because sometimes a few people happen to die within 2 years of working on a project together. Just kidding. He suspected the cause was microbiology. Look, when all you've got is a hammer, right? When searching for his name, I found several sources claiming that Smyk was the sole survivor of the original 12-person conservation team, but according to online translators, this article says otherwise. How microbiologists revive bacteria from the royal crypt at Wawel. In this interview, he describes going into the tomb with another microbiologist and a toxicologist where they collected samples to examine in a lab. He said that after just 20 minutes in the tomb, I felt a very strong headache combined with a distinct weakening of the heart. Involuntarily, I had the impression that I was poisoned. In turn, after a dozen or so hours, the next day, my body's balance was clearly disturbed. While walking, I felt that I could fall to the ground at any moment. I had never had such sensations before, so I was very concerned about the state of my health. Insomnia also appeared. I could not work intensively as usual. After more than 2 weeks of suffering, the constant headaches subsided and I could finally sleep at least 2 or 3 hours a day. However, the balance disorders tormented me for almost 5 more years. And sure enough, in the lab, they found several types of microbes, although none of them were active and they needed some hardcore sciencing to bring them back to life. Eventually, he succeeded, which is a cool thing for a microbiologist to do. However, it does not prove that this inactive fungus caused the deaths of those conservators, nor does it even suggest that its own symptoms were anything other than just being scared of a curse. However, now the internet and even Wikipedia says that, yep, those people probably died from this fungus, A. flavus. So that was in the 1970s. Fast forward to 1998, when French researcher Sylvain Gandin published a paper in Proceedings of the Royal Society called The Curse of the Pharaoh Hypothesis, which was referenced in many places I found online as being a study that suggested that the same fungus, A. flavus, is what also killed Lord Carnarvon, the delicate invalid with persistent lung infections, when he opened King Tut's tomb. However, I managed to find a full PDF of that paper, and in fact, that is not at all what it is about. The Curse of the Pharaoh hypothesis was proposed a few years earlier by microbiologists to describe a way in which a particular pathogen like a fungus with very long-lived spores might evolve very high virulence or ability to damage or even kill the host. So if you wanted to imagine a hypothetical situation where this could happen in order to illustrate what you're talking about, it might be a fungus that is trapped in a tomb for thousands of years with no possible host to infect, and how it might be very deadly to the first humans to open the tomb and have contact with it if it is still active. I swear to God, I read so many microbiology studies about this topic, and that is what all of them were about. Just good, nerdy microbiology talk about possibilities and mathematical models, and could this work, and how might this apply to things like HIV? It literally has nothing to do with King Tut or Lord Carnarvon. As best as I can tell, some microbiologists thought they were being cute with the Pharaoh hypothesis, and the general public saw that title and said, aha, it's real and the cause is fungus. No, it's not real, and even if it was, there's no evidence that the cause would have been fungus. And so outlets like The Lancet decided to weigh in to point out basic facts, like Lord Carnarvon got sick 4 months after he went into the tomb, so it probably wasn't toxic mold. Which is great because we do need scientists rebutting popular opinion when popular opinion is wrong, but I just can't believe that it took me several days of researching and translating just to discover that there has never been any scientific basis for the idea that a toxic mold killed anyone opening any tomb ever in history. All we have are a group of microbiologists discovering cool things and tossing out the idea of a mummy's curse as a fun little Easter egg and a good way to describe what they're envisioning. Which, is exactly what's happened here with the lovely researchers at UPenn who have discovered a possible new treatment for leukemia. Even if it has nothing to do with a mummy's curse, I can see why they used it to try to get some traction in the press, to get a little bit of attention. I mean, you're just continuing on a long tradition. So you know what? I retract all of my eye rolling. Good job on the potential leukemia treatment, even if it has nothing to do with King Tut. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.